Welcome to the show. The show with me. My name is Joe. Welcome to the show. It's time to get set up, you know. Whoa, whoa. Time to get set up, you know. Whoa, whoa. Bam, bam, bada, bada, bow. Howdy, y'all. Joe Hills here, recording as I always do in Nashville, Tennessee, and it's Friday Night Frankenstein. Arg. That's not really what the monster sounds like in the original novel, though. So we're going to hear, Frankenstein, Victor Frankenstein, telling his story to Captain Robert Walden, who is British. Now, I think, so the monster was technically made in Ingolstadt. Now, you might say, Joe, where is Ingolstadt? Great question. Okay. Well, it's not in the Doctor Who wiki, but according to the Scrooge McDuck wiki, it is in Germany. So, apparently it's also in the Marvel database. But yeah. There is no Doctor Who Frankenstein episode, apparently. So we've learned that. Let's get the show set up. If you've never seen a Joe Hill stream before, this is going to be a weird one. Normally, once a week, we try to take all of the tasks that are like extra grindy and knock those out. So that's what we are doing right now, today. Woohoo, hooray. So, let's go ahead and I'm going to plug in my phone so it charges. I've got a really busy day tomorrow, which is why we're not doing the Frankenstein stream tomorrow. I will tell you guys how it went on Sunday. Why is the phone not charging? Is that not plugged in? Okay. Well, that's bad. Let's try flipping over the charging thing. There we go. Okay, phone is now charging. What's happening tomorrow? For operational security reasons, I can't say. I'm gonna be meeting up with another streamer. I'll leave it at that. But we are not gonna be doing a stream. We're just gonna be hanging out. So, actually, there might be a stream. It won't be on my channel, and it won't be on his channel. But there might be a stream. Now is a great time to follow me on Blue Sky if you want to keep up with me randomly going, oh yeah, there is streaming here. Because I'll post where we're at and what we're doing tomorrow. But it's not like a fan open to the public event thing in that way. So, yeah, there's my Blue Sky address or URL. So, what was I going to do? Something. I was going to make a movie. No, I was going to make a live stream. And it was going to be about Vicky F. and his monster. That's right, Victor Frankenstein and his monster. Let's go ahead and get that what we're reading link pinned. If y'all enjoy my streams, please, please, please consider supporting via tips. Tips are welcome via paypal.me/JoeHills and YouTube Super Chat. I know the next Hermitcraft episode is a day or two behind. I'm really trying to make sure that this is a good one. And part of making it a good one is setting up the land office to be actually open for the hermits. I just, this afternoon, finalized the entire process, and I posted a ton of stuff to the hermits, a bunch of screenshots, maps, things like that. You want to see the maps I'm doing? Let's pull that up real quick, just for reference, so you guys can see that I'm not making this up. Like, I made like an entire flyer with how to claim your plot and the different map areas and all this stuff. And then I posted a bunch of additional instructions, posted stuff so they can ask me questions. It's a lot. We got a lot done. But yeah. So that was all directly hermit facing. So that's been taken up time I would normally spend editing an episode, like doing technical writing on and marketing materials for this toward the other hermits. But it's okay. Okay, so in terms of what we are going to do this stream, when we do our reading streams, if you've never been to one of those before, once a week or so, we have an actual stream with an actual VOD. And so we are going to make sure that this VOD is added to the right playlist right now. Edit. Make sure this goes on playlists, Frankenstein Weekly on Hermitcraft 10. Okay. Friday night, Frankenstein, HC10 live. Okay. So we're going to be doing chapters 12 plus tonight. Now, earlier in the previous chapters, the monster found Vicky F. and was like, hey, dude, let me tell you my story. You think I murdered your brother, but let me tell you what life is like out here on the streets. Hyena boy says, I never read Frankenstein. Guess I'm starting on chapter 12. Well, good news. It's in the zeitgeist enough. You probably are more familiar with it than you think. So, our recap thus far. Vicky F. went to school, got obsessed with creating life, learned how to do it, and then, instead of doing what a rational person would do, and prototyping with smaller, easily controlled creatures, jumped straight to making an 8-foot-tall guy. Then, freaked out, passed out, went into a fever coma for like 6 months, and the creature's gone. So he's like, well, Then, someone kills his brother. One of the family staff is falsely accused. Vicky F. is pretty sure that the monster actually did it. Can't figure out how or why he hunted down his brother. But he chases the monster and confronts him. And the monster's like, let me tell you this. Let me tell you this whole story of my life right now. Because you're a terrible parent. And I'm going to say, Vicky F. is not a good parent. Vicky F. legitimately a terrible parent. But is the rest of what the monster is going to say true? Only time will tell. So, while we read, I like to do pretty chill tasks that don't interrupt my flow on the reading. So, for example, sorting a bunch of shulkers is kind of more mentally challenging than you might think. So I don't want to do that. We're not over here to do these shulkers right now. We are getting these shulkers out of my inventory so I can do some digging elsewhere. So we're going to free up some inventory slots. Oh boy, this is... I did not end the last stream in a good stopping place for this. I assumed I was going to have time to do an intermediate stream between the two, and we are not there. So I'm frantically put the blocks away. Sorting's for another day. Da 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 da. Wampa dum bum bum. Okay, so freeing up all of this inventory space here. We now have room to begin harvesting things. Now, what we're not going to want to do during our stream is come pick up a lot of like new armor and stuff. So let's switch to a new elytra. We'll put this one away for now. We're also going to grab a second Silk Touch pickaxe and a second Silk Touch shovel, just to hold us over for right now. And then we're going to grab some empty shulkers from our empty shulker boxes here. And then we're going to head out this way and begin harvesting and clearing out this wedge. This is a whole thing that I just haven't gotten to yet. And I'm realizing the scaffolds might not have been bad to have in terms of clearing out some of this. Okay. So, in Chapter 11 and 10, the monster told... Well, in Chapter 10, the monster first confronts the doctor and asks him to come with him and hear his story. Chapter 11, the monster tells the doctor about how he's found this cabin with an old kennel next against it, a little cottage or whatever, and how he's hiding in the kennel and spying on the people who live inside the house, and they seem so happy. Their lives seem so simple. Which is bizarre, because the monster, thinking these people lead such simple lives, full of simple joys, makes no sense, because their lives are way more complex than his. He was living in the woods eating berries. To him, their lives should seem like they're incredibly stressful and busy. But whatever. This is because Mary Shelley is 18 and grew up with a wealthy family, and the idea of peasants having simple lives is just very romantic. Ah, to not have to worry. But anyway, we are $3 away from the next face camera expansion milestone. Tips are welcome via paypal.me/JoeHills and YouTube Super Chat. Each time we hit a $20 milestone, the camera will expand. And just so you know, I won't necessarily interrupt the middle of a sentence or a paragraph. If we're close to the end of the chapter, I might wait till the end of the chapter to thank you for those. So I will see those, I will appreciate those, and I will thank you, but maybe not immediately. Okay, so we're going to do some final setup stuff here, leading into... the actual kickoff. Why don't we have a bed here? We don't have a bed. We don't have a workbench. We don't have... Yeah, let me grab a couple other things to just get this beacon workable. I've got 2 torches for no reason. No bed for no reason. No chests for no reason. Bum, 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 bum. So we're going to grab some additional chests. We're going to grab a crafting table. Usually we're going to grab all the chests. Why are these chests... Oh, those are named Sand Intensifies. That explains why. Okay. So I think we should now be roughly prepared. I'm going to fly back and get this all set up here. And then we are ready to go. Tell me when you're ready to roll. I got the keys, baby, to put your mind at ease, baby. Red light, green light. Okay, so that can go there. I didn't bring the bed. I got the chest, and I was like, I feel like there's something I'm missing. It's probably the crafting bench. It was not. And so... we've given everybody a few minutes to roll in here. We are going to make our bed and then begin chapter 12. Bum, 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 bum. Chapter 12 of Frankenstein, The Modern Prometheus by Mary Shelley. I lay on my straw. Oh, sorry. This is not the doctor talking. That's the doctor's voice. It's the monster talking. We're already off to a great start. I lay on my straw, but I could not sleep. I thought of the occurrences of the day. What chiefly struck me was the gentle manners of these people, and I longed to join them, but I dared not. I remembered too well the treatment I had suffered the night before
from the barbarous villagers, and resolved, whatever course of conduct I might hereafter think it right to pursue, that, for the present, I would remain quietly in my hovel, watching and endeavoring to discover the motives which influenced their actions. The cottagers arose the next morning before the sun. The young man was constantly employed out of doors. The cottagers arose the next morning before the sun. The young woman arranged the cottage and prepared the food, and the youth departed after the first meal. The day was passed in the same routine as that which preceded it. The young man was constantly employed out of doors, and the girl in various laborious occupations within. The old man, whom I soon perceived to be blind, employed his leisure hours on his instrument, or in contemplation. Nothing could exceed the love and respect which the younger cottages exhibited toward their venerable companion. They performed toward him every little office of affection and duty with gentleness, and he rewarded them by his benevolent smiles. They were not entirely happy. The young man and his companion often went apart and appeared to weep. I saw no cause for unhappiness, but I was deeply affected by it. If such lovely creatures were miserable, it was less strange that I, an imperfect and solitary being, should be wretched. Yet, why were these gentle beings unhappy? They possessed a delightful house, for such it was in my eyes, and had every luxury. They had a fire to warm them when chill, and delicious viands when hungry. They were dressed in excellent clothes, and, still more, they enjoyed one another's company and speech, interchanging each day looks of affection and kindness. What did their tears imply? Did they really express pain? I was, at first, unable to solve these questions, but perpetual attention and time explained to me many appearances which were at first enigmatic. A considerable period elapsed before I discovered one of the causes of uneasiness of the amiable family. It was poverty, and they suffered that evil in a very distressing degree. Their nourishment consisted entirely of the vegetables of their garden and the milk of one cow, which gave very little during the winter, when its masters could scarcely procure food to support it. They often, I believe, suffered the pangs of hunger very poignantly, especially the two younger cottagers, for several times they placed food before the old man, when they reserved none for themselves. This trait of kindness moved me sensibly. I had been accustomed during the night to steal a part of their store for my own consumption, but when I found that in doing this I inflicted pain on the cottagers, I abstained and satisfied myself with berries, nuts, and roots, which I gathered from a neighboring wood. I discovered also another means through which I was enabled to assist their labors. I found the youth spent a great part of each day in collecting wood for the family fire, and during the night I often took his tools, the use of which I quickly discovered, and brought home firing sufficient for the consumption of several days. I remember the first time that I did this, the young woman, when she opened the door in the morning, appeared greatly astonished on seeing a great pile of wood on the outside. She uttered some words in a loud voice, and the youth joined her, who also expressed surprise. I observed with pleasure that he did not go to the forest that day, but spent it in repairing the cottage and cultivating the garden.
I want to imagine, this is Joe Hills talking now, this is not part of the text. I want to imagine that, like, the monster says, like, so one night I went and gathered enough wood for several days, and then I left it in front of the door, okay? The monster has never had a front door of his own. He's never had an apartment or a house. He's hiding in a kennel. Before that, he lived in the woods. I like to think that he doesn't necessarily understand how delivering a gift to the front door works. I find it amusing to imagine that when the young cottager woman opened the front door, there's just like a huge pile of wood, like, inconveniently in the door. Like, she pulls the door inward, and it's just like, was there a tree storm in the night that just dumped a ton of logs, like, chopped? Because that's the thing, though, too, is he says he didn't just grab a bunch of random branches for the fire, right? He used the youth's, like, wood cutting tools. Like, so it's the sort of thing, like, you know those things where somebody opens their front door and there's just like a snowbank there? Just that, but with like a pile of firewood? You know, it's the sort of thing like they have to squeeze past it to get out. Because he's never used their front door. He doesn't know how much space they need. Centauratron says he also apparently knows what poverty is. Well, he's the thing is that the monster says that he's learned several things in his time and travels. And he's explicitly said in the last chapter that a lot of what he observed here, he didn't have words for at the time. So he didn't have a word for poverty yet when he's observing them. But he's saying, like, on reflection, you know, it's like I understood that they were sad and that they didn't have enough and I wanted to help. But he didn't have, like, a core concept of poverty yet. So, yeah, to me, this is one of those, like, if this was a film version of Frankenstein, if I was going to make a Joe Hill's Frankenstein film, this whole thing would be all of the stories within a story nested. And at various points in the story, the different listeners, like, so for example, Robert Walton's sister might be reading the letters from Captain Robert Walton to her husband, which include, so Robert Walton heard this story from Vicky F. when he rescued Vicky F. from an iceberg while he was on a ship en route to the North Pole. So you've got Robert Walton writing this to his sister, So you've got her sister reading it, or his sister reading it to her husband, and the husband occasionally interrupts with questions. You've got Robert Walden occasionally interrupting Vicky F with questions, and at this point you have Vicky F occasionally interrupting the monster with questions or commentary. So, and the thing is, when there's something particularly egregious that happens in these nested stories, you can do like a split screen, all three listeners go like spit out their tea and go, what? Okay. But anyway. So the monster has left this wood, and that freed up the young man to do work around the cabin and the garden rather than spending the whole day looking for wood. So, because one of the things about the monster is because he's 8 foot tall, he has a very long stride. He's actually very physically capable. So, you know, the young man might be barely trudging through the snow in the winter, but the monster is just like loping through it, no problem. So he can go further from the cabin, chop down trees, or gather fallen wood, that sort of thing, and it's not a problem for him. Okay. So we're gonna lay our heads down and dream here real quick, and then resume our reading. Yeah, that's the thing, is we have 3 tiers of unreliable narrators at this point. We have the monster telling the story to Vicky F, Vicky F telling the story to Robert Walden, Captain Walden telling the story to his sister. Okay. So, by degrees, I made discovery of still greater moment. I found that these people possessed a method of communicating their experience and feelings to each other by articulate sounds. I perceived that the words they spoke sometimes produced pleasure or pain, smiles or sadness in the minds and countenances of the hearers. This was indeed a godlike science, and I ardently desired to become acquainted with it. But I was baffled in every attempt I made for this purpose. Their pronunciation was quick, and the words they uttered, not having any apparent connection with visible objects, I was unable to discover any clue by which I could unravel the mystery of their reference. By great application, however, and after having remained during the space of several revolutions of the moon in my hovel, I had discovered the names that were given to some of the most familiar objects of discourse. I learned and applied the words fire, milk, bread, wood. I learned also the names of the cottagers themselves. The youth and his companion had each of them several names, but the old man only had one, which was father. The youth and his companion had each of them, the girl was called sister or Agatha, and the youth Felix, brother or son. I cannot describe the delight I felt when I learned the ideas appropriated to each of these sounds and was able to pronounce them.
I distinguished several other words without being, as yet, able to apply them or understand them, such as good, dearest, and unhappy. I spent the winter in this manner. The gentle manners and beauty of the cottagers greatly endeared them to me when they were unhappy. I felt depressed when they rejoiced.
Oh, sorry. That sentence is way different if I read it wrong. Okay, hold on.
When they were unhappy, I felt depressed. When they rejoiced, I sympathized in their joys. I saw few human beings besides them, and if any other happened to enter the cottage, their harsh manners and rude gait only enhanced me to the superior accomplishments of my friends. The old man, I could perceive, often endeavored to encourage his children, as sometimes I found that he called them to cast off their melancholy. He would talk in a cheerful accent, with an expression of goodness that bestowed pleasure even upon me. Agatha listened with respect. Her eyes sometimes filled with tears, which she endeavored to wipe away unperceived, but I generally found that her countenance and tone were more cheerful after having listened to the exhortations of her father. It was not thus with Felix. He was always the saddest of the group, even to my unpracticed senses. He appeared to have suffered more deeply than his friends, but if his countenance was more sorrowful, his voice was more cheerful than that of his sister, especially when he addressed the old man.
Gonna do some quick inventory management right here, just to keep this moving. And the logs are going in there. And everything else in the doom box or the stone.
I could mention innumerable instances which, although slight, mark the disposition of those amiable cottagers. In the midst of poverty and want, Felix carried with pleasure to his sister the first little white flower that peeped out from beneath the snowy ground. Early in the morning, before she had risen, he cleared away the snow that had obstructed her path to the milk house, drew water from the well, and brought wood from the outhouse, where, to his perpetual astonishment, he found his store always replenished by an invisible hand. In the day, I believe he worked sometimes for a neighboring farmer, because he often went forth and did not return until dinner, yet brought no wood with him. At other times, he worked in the garden, but there was little to do in the frosty season. He read to the old man and Agatha. The reading had puzzled me extremely at first, but by degrees I recognized that he uttered many of the same sounds when he read as when he talked. I conjectured, therefore, that he found on the paper signs for speech, which he understood, and I ardently long to comprehend these also. But how was it possible when I did not even understand the sounds for which they stood as signs? I improved, however, sensibly in this science, but not sufficiently to follow up any kind of conversation, although I applied my whole mind to the endeavor. For I easily perceived that although I eagerly longed to discover myself to the cottagers, I ought not make the attempt until I first became the master of their language, which knowledge might enable me to make them overlook the deformity of my figure. For with this also, the contrast perpetually presented to my eyes had made me acquainted. I had admired the perfect forms of my cottagers, their grace, beauty, and delicate complexions. But how I was terrified when I viewed myself in a transparent pool. At first I started back, unable to believe that it was I who indeed reflected in the mirror. And when I became fully convinced that I was, in reality, the monster that I am, I was filled with the bitterest sensations of despondence and mortification. Alas, I did not entirely know the fatal effects of this miserable deformity. As the sun became warmer and the light of day longer, the snow vanished, and I beheld the bare trees and the black earth. From this time, Felix was more employed, and the heart-moving indications of impending famine disappeared. Their food, as I afterwards found, was coarse, but it was wholesome, and they procured a sufficiency of it. Several new kinds of plants sprang up in the garden, which they dressed, and these signs of comfort increased daily as the season advanced. That old man, leaning on his son, walked each day at noon when it did not rain, and I found it was called when the heavens poured forth its waters. This frequently took place. But a high wind quickly dried the earth, and the season became far more pleasant than it had been. My mode of life in my hovel was uniform. During the morning, I attended the motions of the cottagers, and when they were dispersed in various occupations, I slept. The remainder of the day was spent in observing my friends. When they had retired to rest, if there was any moon or the night was starlit, I went into the woods and collected my own food and fuel for the cottage. When I returned, as often it was necessary, I cleared their path from the snow and performed those offices that I had seen done by Felix. I afterwards found that these labors, performed by an invisible hand, greatly astonished him, and once or twice I heard them, on these occasions, utter the words, "Good spirit," "wonderful," but I did not then understand the significance of these terms. My thoughts now became more active, and I longed to discover the motives and feelings of these lovely creatures. I was inquisitive to know why Felix appeared so miserable, and Agatha so sad. I thought, foolish wretch, that it might be within my power to restore happiness to these deserving people. When I slept or was absent, the forms of the venerable blind father, the gentle Agatha, and the excellent Felix flitted before me. I looked upon them as superior beings who would be the arbiters of my future destiny. I formed in my imagination 1,000 pictures of presenting myself to them, and their reception of me. I imagined they would be disgusted, until my gentle demeanor and conciliating words until by my gentle demeanor and conciliating words I should first win their favor, and afterwards their love. These thoughts exhilarated me and led me to apply with fresh ardor to acquiring the art of language. My organs were indeed harsh, but supple, and though my voice was very unlike the soft music of their tones, yet I pronounced such words as I understood with tolerable ease. It was as the ass and lapdog, yet surely the gentle ass, whose intentions were affectionate, although his manners were rude, deserved better treatment than blows and execration. The pleasant showers and genial warmth of spring greatly altered the aspect of the earth. Men who before this change seemed to have been hid in caves dispersed themselves and were employed in various arts of cultivation. The birds sang in more cheerful notes, and their leaves began to bud forth on the trees. Happy, happy earth, fit habitation for gods, which so short a time before was bleak, damp, and unwholesome. My spirits were elevated by the enchanting appearance of nature. The past was blotted from memory. The present was tranquil. The future gilded by bright rays of hope and anticipations of joy.
And that concludes Chapter 12 of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, The Modern Prometheus. Welcome, Mage of Colors Raiders. I was in the middle of reading that chapter. I usually try to wait till I'm to a logical breaking point, but yeah, thank you. Their read message was Mage of Colors bringing the rainbow. Well, welcome. I appreciate your polychromatic spree. How do I read and mine at the same time? I'm doing neither as well as if I only did one, and yet I attempt to improve my art through practice. Tim says, early sci-fi was so observational. Yeah, I was actually thinking that one of the science fiction elements of this story that would not be recognizable as science fiction until the development of the television was in some ways Vicky F. has left his kids to be raised by television, or left his kid to be raised by television. Although, I'll take it one step further, because with the work he's doing, shoveling snow to clear the path, and collecting the firewood and stuff, it's closer to Vicky F. letting his kids be raised by streamers and letting the kids use the credit card to tip. So, only if you are an adult using your own money. Tips are welcome via paypal.me/JoeHills and YouTube Super Chat. Vicky F. was a terrible parent, and I don't want y'all getting the wrong idea. Okay, we are $3 away from our next face camera expansion milestone. But yeah, this is actually bizarrely prescient in some small ways, where it's like he's not directly interacting with them, but he is. It's like he's watching a stream where there's like what do you call those commands where you can unlock things in a game or whatever? He's unlocking free time. Is the creature an iPad baby? Oh, is that what they call those? iPad babies? Sandra Lynn says, I was going to say, it feels like there's a parasocial relationship going on between the creature and the household. T-Lug says that technology is called crowd control. Ah, that's a good name for it. Simply Lost says, sometimes they call them iPad kids. Interesting. Yep. Okay, so here's what I want to do. I want to go and drop off some of this stuff over here. And some of that there. So does anybody have any other thoughts about Chapter 12 so far? I'd like to give a few minutes to let each chapter breathe while I also do some inventory management real quick. We're going to put the gravel in a separate box here. He's like a fairy that makes shoes in the night. Yeah, he's really... You know, he understands that they're sad. And he understands... The thing is, he understands being resource constrained. Because when he was in the forest alone, he was resource constrained. So he's like, these people are unhappy in similar ways to the ways I've been unhappy when I didn't have things I need. They don't have enough time, or they don't have enough wood, and they don't have enough food. And so if I get them wood, then they can spend more time getting their own food. If I stop taking food from them, that'll help too. Because early on, he was also just eating from their supplies for the winter, and that was part of why they were running out of food. And as soon as he realized that, he stopped. So... It is also possible... It is also possible that wherever he was cutting down the wood from is not somewhere he was supposed to be cutting down the wood from. It might be that the reason it was taking the kids so long to cut down the wood is there's only certain places that he was supposed to be doing it, and the monster just doesn't care. He's just chopping down trees wherever. Like one of the neighbors every morning wakes up and there's just another tree that's chopped down. Because he's like, he's not gonna chop down the trees right outside these guys' house. Centauratron says, oh, I get it now. So he's applying his current knowledge to the retelling. That's why he knows words like poverty when he doesn't know words like father. Yeah. Cristalli3 says, I'm listening tonight while attempting to replace my graphics card. I don't know much about computers, and it's not going great. Yeah, that's a challenge, Cristalli3. In theory, it should be as easy as unplug the power from the old one, unscrew the PCI slot screw if there is one, slip the thing out, and swap it with a new one. But then you get into weird stuff like if the power supply cable on the old one is different from the power supply cable on the new one, and yeah. Oof. Centauratron says, I do like that he's describing his experiences learning the language, though. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty clear to me. So, Mary Shelley's own mother died. And we've got a lot of dead moms in this book. This is pre-Disney Dead Mom Town. Vicky F's mom died, and now this family has a dead mother. And because like that's like really pretty explicit in the fact that the father only has one name for him. There's no husband, you know. So it's clear that the girl is definitely his daughter. Although Shelley also explicitly says that. Hey, I found a cat. Bye, cat. Cristalli says, I have 40% correctly identified which component is the graphics card, and I've half figured out how to unsecure it. So, Cristalli, I don't want to sound patronizing, but the easiest way to figure out which one's the graphics card that's in there now is to figure out which one has video ports sticking out the back of it. So, graphics cards are traditionally PCI cards, and PCI cards stick out the back of the computer in a slot, and then usually have different ports depending on what kind of PCI cards they are. Welcome, Riven Raiders. My name is Joe Hills. I'm broadcasting live from Nashville, Tennessee. We just finished reading Frankenstein Chapter 12, and we're about to move on to Chapter 13. But yeah, so the only reason I could imagine that you would have multiple cards that would have that you wouldn't be able to tell which one's the graphics card. If you have more than one card with an HDMI port, it's probably because one of them is some sort of capture card for capturing HDMI. And that would usually have a clear in label above the HDMI port, whereas a traditional graphics card would only be outputs. Cristalli says, I'm now 85% sure I have the right component. Yeah. The graphics card is the one with the HDMI port. If you have more than one with an HDMI port, then there's probably a good reason for that, and you can probably reverse engineer from there. Yeah, a lot of graphics cards have white old style ports as well. Pump, pump, pump. Not all of them, though. But yeah, a graphics card usually has at least one, but often several HDMI, and then sometimes the old white graphics card ports, or graphics monitor cable ports. Okay. So. How are we doing on inventory? T-Lug says, this is a 45% improvement. Minecraft story time and PC support. What a win. Well, if y'all are enjoying the stream, just as a reminder, we are $3 away from our first face camera expansion of the stream. Tips are welcome via paypal.me/JoeHills and YouTube Super Chat. It is the end of the month and bills are due, so believe me, anything y'all want to give would be deeply, deeply appreciated and very timely. Okay. So let's go ahead here, and I'm trying to figure out what the best use of my time is in terms of clearing out all this. I feel like we should just start shaving this whole thing down. Just take the whole thing out rather than worry about the logs, but like, yeah. Okay, so let's go ahead and update our what we're reading link as well. I'm gonna put that on chapter 13, manually unpin at end of stream. Place pinned message. Okay. Alrighty, lay your head down, dream crafting den. Hey, we got a tip rolling in. Let's see who it is from. Haley is tipping 5. That's going to get us $2 past our next face camera expansion milestone. Please direct your attention to my face because we're about to expand. Joe. And we are going to lower the Joe Pasty now to 80%. La da da da. There it goes. Okay. Most excellent. Let's move the reading window over so it's easier to get to. Alrighty. Of course. Part of this has to be just outside of beacon range. That's the only way that this could be possible. You don't have another beacon down there yet. Yep. Okay. So this has been a lot of backstory from the monster. If he is telling this story to Vicky F. at roughly the same pace I'm reading it, he has been talking for about an hour now. And Vicky F. has been sitting in this cliffside cabin by a little fire, listening to the monster, as he calls it, the wretch, speak. So, chapter 13 of Frankenstein, or the modern Prometheus. Oh, hey, real quick, we got a tip rolling in from Victoria for 43. That's going to get us up to 165. So that's 2 face camera expansion milestones and 15 away from the next one. Here we go. It's time to expand. Just lowering the Joe Pasty now to 70%. And then numero dos, even larger Joe. Lowering the Joe Pasty now to 60%. At this point, we are now covering as much of the screen as possible. We will continue to expand the camera, but it's already edge to edge. Ooh. So that means that everybody who's tipped up to this point has been making the camera more obnoxious. If you'd like to make the camera less obnoxious, it will continue to reduce in Joe Pasty as it grows. And we are now 15 away from the next face camera expansion milestone. Thank you again to Victoria. So, anyway, chapter 13 of Frankenstein, the Modern Prometheus, by Mary Shelley.
I now hasten to the more moving part of my story. I shall relate events that impressed me with feelings which, from what I have been, have made me what I am. Spring advanced rapidly. The weather became fine and the skies cloudless. It surprised me that what before was desert and gloomy should now bloom with the most beautiful flowers and verdure. My senses were gratified and refreshed by 1,000 scents of delight and 1,000 sights of beauty. It was on one of these days, when my cottagers periodically rested from labor. The old man played on his guitar, and the children listened to him, that I observed the countenance of Felix was melancholy beyond expression. He sighed frequently, and once his father paused in his music, and I conjectured by his manner that he inquired the cause of his son's sorrow. Felix replied in a cheerful accent, and the old man was recommencing his music when someone tapped at the door. It was a lady on horseback, accompanied by a countryman as a guide. The lady was dressed in a dark suit and covered with a thick black veil. Agatha asked a question, to which the stranger only replied by pronouncing in a sweet accent the name of Felix. Her voice was musical, but unlike that of either of my friends. On hearing this word, Felix came up hastily to the lady, who, when she saw him, threw up her veil, and I beheld a countenance of angelic beauty and expression. Her hair of a shining raven black and curiously braided. Her eyes were dark but gentle, although animated, her features of irregular proportion, and her complexion wondrously fair, each cheek tinged with a lovely pink. Felix seemed ravished with delight when he saw her. Every trait of sorrow vanished from his face, and it instantly expressed a degree of ecstatic joy, of which I could hardly have believed him capable. His eyes sparkled as his cheek flushed with pleasure, and at that moment I thought him as beautiful as the stranger. She appeared affected by different feelings, wiping a few tears from her lovely eyes. She held out her hand to Felix, who kissed it rapturously and called her, as well as I could distinguish, his sweet Arabian. She did not appear to understand him, but smiled. He assisted her to dismount, and dismissing her guide, conducted herself to the cottage. Some conversation took place between him and his father, and the young stranger knelt at the old man's feet and would have kissed his hand, but he raised her and embraced her affectionately. I soon perceived that although the stranger uttered articulate sounds and appeared to have a language of her own, she was neither understood nor herself understood by the cottagers. They made many signs which I did not comprehend, but I saw that her presence diffused gladness through the cottage, dispelling their sorrow as the sun dissipates the morning mists. Felix seemed peculiarly happy, and with smiles of delight welcomed his Arabian. Agatha, the ever-gentle Agatha, kissed the hands of the lovely stranger, and pointing to her brother, made signs which appeared to me to mean that he had been sorrowful until she came. Some hours passed thus, while they, by their countenances, expressed joy, some of which I did not comprehend. Presently, I found, by the frequent recurrence of some sound which the stranger repeated after them, that she was endeavoring to learn their language. And the idea instantly occurred to me that I should make use of the same instructions to the same end. The stranger learned about 20 words the first lesson. Most of them, indeed, were those which I before understood, but I profited by the others. As night came on, Agatha and the Arabian retired early. When they separated, Felix kissed the hand of the stranger and said, "Good night, sweet Sapphi." He sat up much longer, conversing with his father, and by the frequent repetition of her name, I conjectured that their lovely guest was the subject of conversation. I ardently desired to understand them, and bent every faculty toward that purpose, but found it utterly impossible. The next morning, Felix went out to his work, and after the usual occupations of Agatha were finished, the Arabian sat at the feet of the old man, and taking his guitar, played some airs so entrancingly beautiful that they at once drew tears of sorrow and delight from my eyes. She sang, and her voice flowed in rich cadence. Swelling or dying away like a nightingale of the woods. When she had finished, she gave the guitar to Agatha, who at first declined it. She played a simple air, and her voice accompanied it in sweet accents, but unlike the wondrous strain of the stranger. The old man appeared enraptured, and said some words which Agatha endeavored to explain to Safie, and by which he appeared to wish to express that she bestowed upon him the greatest delight with her music. The days now passed as peaceably as before, with the sole alteration that joy had taken the place of sadness in the countenance of my friends. Safie was always gay and happy. She and I improved readily in the knowledge of language, so that in 2 months I began to comprehend most of the words uttered by my protectors. In the meanwhile, also, the black ground was covered with herbage, and the green banks interspersed with innumerable flowers, sweet to the scent and the eyes, star of pale radiance among the moonlight woods. The sun became warmer, the nights clear. And balmy, and my nocturnal rambles were an extreme pleasure to me, although they were considerably shortened by the late setting and early rising of the sun, for I never ventured abroad during daylight, fearful of meeting with the same treatment I formerly endured in the first village which I entered. My days were spent in close attention, that I might more speedily master the language, and I may boast that I improved more rapidly than the Arabian, who understood very little and conversed in broken accents, whilst I comprehended and could imitate almost every word that was spoken. While I improved in speech, I also learned the science of letters as it was taught to the stranger, and this opened before me a wide field for wonder and delight. The book from which Felix instructed Safie was Volney's Ruins of Empires. I should not have understood the purport of this book had not Felix, in reading it, given every minute explanation. He had chosen this work, he said, because the declaratory style was framed in imitation of the Eastern authors. Through this work, I obtained a cursory knowledge of history and a view of the several empires at present existing in the world. It gave me an insight into the manners, governments, and religions of the different nations of the earth.
This next part's kind of racist. We're gonna skip this. I don't think that the monster is necessarily racist. I think that sometimes when, the novel, when the history books you're presented with have certain stereotypes in them, you're going to repeat those stereotypes, but that doesn't mean I have to. Vicky F didn't build no dummy, and I was not even built by Vicky F. So, I'm going to do my own thing here. So, basically, he lists some pros and cons about different peoples of the earth that you can read at home at your leisure. And then we're going to continue. Until we get to the wonderful virtue of the early Romans, of their subsequent degenerating, the decline of their mighty empire, of chivalry, Christianity, and kings. I heard of the discovery of the American hemisphere, and wept with Sapphi over the hapless fate of its original inhabitants. These wonderful narrations inspired me with strange feelings. Was man indeed at once so powerful, so virtuous and magnificent, yet so vicious and base? He appeared at one time a mere scion of the evil principle, and at another as all that can be conceived of noble and godlike. To be a great and virtuous man appeared the highest honor that can befall a sensitive being. To be base and vicious, as many on the record have been, appeared the lowest degradation, a condition more abject than that of the blind mole or harmless worm. For a long time I could not conceive how one man could go forth to murder his fellow, or even why there were laws and governments. But when I heard details of vice and bloodshed, my wonder ceased, and I turned away with disgust and loathing. Every conversation of the cottagers now opened new wonders to me, while I listened to the instructions which Felix bestowed upon the Arabian. The strange system of human society was explained to me. I heard of the division of property, of immense wealth and squalid poverty, of rank, descent, and noble blood. These words indeed induced me to turn toward myself. I learned that the possessions most esteemed by your fellow creatures were high and unsullied descent, united with riches. A man might be respected with only one of these advantages, as a vagabond and a slave A man might be respected with only one of these advantages, but without either, he was considered, except in very rare instances, as a vagabond and a slave, doomed to waste his power for the profits of the chosen few. And what was I? Of my creation and creator, I was absolutely ignorant. But I knew that I possessed no money, no friends, no kind of property. I was, besides, endued with a figure hideously deformed and loathsome. I was not even of the same nature as of man. I was more agile than they, and could subsist upon a coarser diet. I bore the extremes of heat and cold with less injury to my frame. My stature far exceeded theirs. When I looked around, I saw and heard of none like me. Was I then a monster, a blot upon earth, from which all men fled, and whom all men disowned?
I cannot describe to you the agony that these reflections inflicted upon me. I tried to dispel them, but sorrow only increased with knowledge. Oh, that I had forever remained in my naive wood, nor known nor felt beyond the sensations of hunger, thirst, and heat. Of what a strange nature is knowledge. It clings to the mind when it had once seized on it like a lichen on the rock. I wish sometimes to shake off all thought and feeling, but I learned that there was but one means to overcome the sensation of pain. And that was death. A state which I feared, yet I did not understand. I admired virtue and good feelings, and loved the gentle manners and amiable qualities of my cottagers. But I was shut out from intercourse with them, except through means which I obtained by stealth, when I was unseen and unknown, and which rather increased than satisfied the desire I had of becoming one among my fellows. The gentle words of Agatha and the animated smiles of the the gentle words of Agatha and the animated smiles of the charming Arabian were not for me. The mild exhortations of the old man and the lively conversation of the loved Felix were not for me. Miserable, unhappy wretch. Other lessons were impressed upon me even more deeply. I heard of the differences of the sexes, the birth and growth of children, how the father doted on the smiles of the infant and the lively sallies of the older child, how all life and cares of the mother were wrapped up in the precious charge, how the mind of the youth expanded and gained knowledge of brother, sister, and of all the various relationships which bind one human to another in their mutual bonds. But where were my friends and relations? No father had watched my infant days. No mother had blessed me with smiles and caresses. Or, if they had, all my past life was now a blot, a blind vacancy in which I distinguish nothing. From my earliest remembrance, I had been, as I then was, in height and proportion. I had never yet seen a being resembling me, or who claimed any intercourse with me. What was I? The question again recurred, only to be answered with groans. I will soon explain to what these feelings tended, but allow me now to return to the cottagers, whose story excited in me such various feelings of indignation, delight, and wonder, but which all terminated in additional love and reverence for my protectors. For so I loved, in an innocent, half-painful deceit, to call them.
And that concludes Chapter 13 of Frankenstein, the Modern Prometheus. Welcome, Crenshaw. Welcome, Philodox. Welcome, Sir Sirius. Glad y'all could join us. How are y'all doing? What do you think about that chapter? The monster is explaining now how he actually finally learned proper English. And it was because, presumably, this is a cousin. Like, these people are so poor. It's not like... The only thing I could think of, if this... Once again, it's been a while since I read the book, and I've been avoiding spoiling myself reading forward. I'm trying to put myself in the mindset of what does the monster know at the time? What does the reader know at the time? Because I read this book for the first time 20 years ago. Or not first time, for the most recent time 20 years ago. So I'm a little bit... It's been a while, and I'm kind of trying to look at it with fresh eyes. I would imagine if she isn't a cousin, then maybe the dad was her father's guitar instructor, or a friend of her father from his musical days. Like, because it seems like he is also giving her instruction, or at least, like, getting to see how well she plays. So maybe she's not there to be instructed, but, you know, her father was a friend of his. And I'm sure we'll get back into that a little bit more as the story progresses. But no, they people are asking, do they know the monster is living there? No, so they have an abandoned, like, old dog kennel next to the house that's, like, leaning against the house. So he's watching them through the doors of this abandoned shed. Centauratron says, I assume this was a romantic interest of Felix's. That might be the case, but normally a romantic interest doesn't come live with you wearing all black from another country who doesn't speak your language. So, like, I don't think... So, like, maybe her and Felix had met when they were both kids, if this is, like, the daughter of one of his father's friends, and his father's friend has passed away. That's my guess, is that this is a parallel to Victor Frankenstein's mother adopting Frankenstein's quote-unquote cousin slash fiance. Didn't Felix travel? He worked at another farm. Or at least that's the monster. The monster assumed Felix worked at another farm. But I'm not sure that this is Felix's new wife. Because I feel like he wouldn't have been sitting there crying and she wouldn't have dressed up in all black. I think he was surprised to see her. I don't think she showed up there. Or if he was crying and it is his new wife, he was crying because her father died. But it seems like she had traveled a long way, because she had come with a guide. So I don't think she's the local nearby farm. She's from the local nearby farm that he was working at. Isn't the girl also meant to be a parallel to the monster too, as someone who's different but accepted with open arms? That's a great read. That's a great read, Skittish Witches. Yeah, there's a lot... Like, Mary Shelley is a young writer when she's writing this. She's only 18. And so when somebody is starting out, they tend to have certain things that they're trying... They tend to set relatively straightforward goals for themselves in their writing. And it seems to me like, whether this was conscious or subconscious, Shelley is attempting to tell the same story multiple times through the construction of parallels. Robert Walden searching for the secret of a North Pole is a parallel to Victor Frankenstein searching for the meaning of life. You know, the adoption of Safia and the adoption of Victor's fiance run parallel. Like, there are certain things that they're trying to hit home, but they also talk about, though, how Justine, I think the name of the staff member who was murdered, not murdered, who was executed after being found guilty for a murder she didn't commit. She was also essentially an adopted daughter of the family, which led to her death. Crenshaw says, I haven't read Frankenstein for a while. I like this discussion since it's a new perspective. Yeah, I haven't read this for 20 years, and so I'm getting a lot out of it. I'm really glad that the other books that we've been doing for the readings, other than the Christmas Carol I read once a year every year. But for the other books, Moby Dick and Dracula, those were both books I had read 10 years ago, and that I was coming back to a decade later. So they were familiar enough, but I was coming at them with fresh eyes. And this is a lot different coming back to a book 20 years later. Because we're finally getting to the parts of the book that I kind of remember, but my analysis and my, 20 years ago, streaming didn't exist. So the value of this as a study of parasocial relationships and in relation to the way that the monster is interacting with this family is a lot like a kid being left with an iPad to watch streamers all day. It's very interesting and not something that Shelley could have intended at the time of writing. But it's interesting to consider. Skittish Wishes says, I haven't read this for 3 months, but it's way more fun discussing it in a live stream than the classroom. Skittish Wishes says, calling the monster an iPad kid is I don't know what that word is, take, but accurate. Crenshaw says, I love books that grow to mean more than they originally were meant to. Well, that's one of the things that makes some of the classics enduring, is they're more relevant today. And that's, George Orwell, when he wrote 1984, wasn't hoping it would be more relevant today than it was at the time. But boy, it sure ended up being more relevant today than it was at the time. Neo says, while I don't know if this is an intentional commentary or Shelley's own biases coming in, I do find it interesting how the monster ends up learning racist and sexist things from the people based on the people he's learning from, or the learning about the world from, sort of emphasizing the fact these harmful ideas are socially passed around and not some inherent truth. Yeah, no, that's a very fair thing. Yeah, Fahrenheit 451, also relevant today. That one's not out of copyright, though, so we can't read it on the stream. Skittish Wishes says it's a wild take. I typoed. Ah, gotcha. Give the monster an iPad, it learns to be a human. Well, the thing is, because the monster... Here's where this really gets interesting as a metaphor. Because the monster is, gathering firewood and shoveling snow for them overnight, and they think it's, a good spirit, or whatever they say. Yeah, wonderful spirit, It's actually kind of like the monster is a kid watching on his parents' iPad who keeps donating bits to the streamer but never says anything in chat. That Twitch account was tied to the parents' credit card and they haven't noticed. This monster is going out and cutting down the neighbors' trees and giving them firewood from it, and nobody... We don't see the other side of that. But, that wood is coming from somewhere. Okay, our inventory is full. Southern Sky says, why is the inventory, or why does it say setting up stream? Well, we haven't gone through our pre-stream checklist yet. So, we're not really set up. Okay, did I greet everybody by name? I think I did. Did we post the tipping link? Tips are welcome via paypal.me/JoeHills and YouTube Super Chat. We are 15 away from the next face camera expansion milestone. Okay. I didn't greet Scar. Whoops. You can sleep only at night, only at night. Okay. So I think we are going to we're going to continue to chapter 14. So let me update the what we're reading link, because this one doesn't look like a very long chapter. And we've got a half hour left. So, if please consider tipping. I really appreciate it. It's the end of the month, and it is tight. So, yeah. Anything y'all want to give would be deeply appreciated. Okay, we posted the tipping link. We greeted everybody, taking down the setting up sign. Now it's time to read chapter 14.
Some time elapsed before I learned the history of my friends. It was one which could not fail to impress itself deeply on my mind, unfolding as it did a number of circumstances, each interesting and wonderful to one so utterly inexperienced as I was. The name of the old man was de Lacy. He was descended from a good family in France, where he had lived for many years in affluence, respected by his superiors and beloved by his equals. His son was bred in the service of his country, and Agatha had ranked with ladies of the highest distinction. A few months before my arrival, they had lived in a large and luxurious city called Paris, surrounded by friends, and possessed of every enjoyment which virtue, refinement of intellect or taste, accompanied by a moderate fortune, could afford. The father of Safi had been the cause of their ruin. He was a Turkish merchant and had inhabited Paris for many years, when, for some reason I could not learn, he became obnoxious to the government. He was seized and cast into prison the very day that Safi arrived from Constantinople to join him. He was tried and condemned to death. The injustice of his sentence was very flagrant. All Paris was indignant, and it was judged that his religion and wealth, rather than the crime against him, had been the true cause of his condemnation. Felix had been accidentally present at the trial. His horror and indignation were uncontrollable when he learned the decision of the court. He made, at that moment, a solemn vow to deliver him, and then looked around for the means. After many fruitless attempts to gain admittance to the prison, he found a strongly grated window. In an unguarded part of the building, which lighted the dungeon of the unfortunate merchant, who, loaded with chains, waited in despair the execution of the barbarous sentence. Felix visited the grate at night, and made known to the prisoner his intentions in his favor. The Turk, amazed and delighted, endeavored to kindle the zeal of his deliverer by promises of reward and wealth. Felix rejected his offers with contempt. Yet, when he saw the lovely Safi, who was allowed to visit her father, and who, by her gestures, expressed her lively gratitude, the youth could not help owning to his own mind that the captive possessed a treasure which would fully reward his toil and hazard. The Turk quickly perceived the impression the daughter had made on the heart of Felix, and endeavored to secure him more entirely in his interests by the promise of her hand in marriage so soon as he should be conveyed to a place of safety. Felix was too delicate to accept this offer. Yet he looked forward to the probability of the event as to the consummation of his happiness. During the ensuing days, while the preparations were going forward for the escape of the merchant, the zeal of Felix was warmed by several letters that he received from this lovely girl, who found means to express her thoughts in the language of her lover by the aid of an old man, a servant of her father, who understood French. She thanked him in the most ardent terms for his intended services toward her parent, and, at the same time, she greatly deplored her own fate. I have copies of these letters.
Okay, real quick, I just want to say this is not... I did not remember this part, and my guess that... about the family friend guitar thing. Okay, so they don't know each other through guitar. Okay, I'm willing to concede that. Also, real quick, I want to thank Emma for tipping 15. That gets us evenly to our next face camera expansion milestone, who says, just got off work, glad to be able to chill out with a Joe Hills stream. Well, thank you very much, Emma. Here we go. It's time to expand. Just do. Lowering the Joe pasty now to 50%. Appreciate it, Emma. Sandra Lynn says, I don't remember this part at all. And Tim says, I didn't know any good families lived in France. So yeah, we are 20 away from the next face camera expansion milestone, 200 away from the entrance of the Beetlejuice. Let's go. But yeah, I find it funny that, and now the monster's like, once again, we're doing stories within stories. We have letters within stories at this point. It's just letters all the way down.
I have copies of the letters, for I found means, during my residence in the hovel, to procure the implements of writing, and the letters were often in the hands of Felix or Agatha. Before I depart, I will give them all to you. They will prove the truth of my tale, but at present the sun is already far declined. I shall only have time to repeat the substance of them to you. Safi related that her mother was a Christian Arab, seized and made a slave by the Turks. Recommended by her beauty, she had won the heart of the father of Safi, who married her. The young girl spoke in high and enthusiastic terms of her mother. She instructed her daughter The young girl spoke in high and enthusiastic terms of her mother, who, born in freedom, spurned the bondage to which she was now reduced. She instructed her daughter in the tenets of her religion and taught her to aspire to higher powers of intellect and independence of spirit forbidden to the female followers of Muhammad. The lady died, but her lessons were indelibly impressed on the mind of Safi, who, sickened at the prospect of again returning to Asia and being immured within the walls of a harem, allowed only to occupy herself with infantile amusements, ill-suited to the temper of her soul, now accustomed to grand ideas and a noble emulation for virtue. The prospect of marrying a Christian and remaining in a country where women were allowed to take a rank in society was enchanting to her. The day for the execution of the Turk was fixed, but on the night previous, he quitted his prison and, before morning, was distant many leagues from Paris. Felix had procured passports in the name of his father, sister, and himself. He had previously communicated his plan to the former, who aided the deceit by quitting his house under the pretense of a journey and concealed himself with his daughter in an obscure part of Paris. Felix conducted the fugitives through France to Lyons and across Mont Cenis to Leghorn, where the merchant had decided to wait a favorable opportunity of passing into some part of the Turkish dominions. Safi resolved to remain with her father until the moment of his departure, before which time the Turk renewed his promise that she should be united with his deliverer, and Felix remained with them in the expectation of this event, and in the meantime he enjoyed the society of the Arabian, who exhibited toward him the simplest and tenderest affection. They conversed with one another through the means of an interpreter, and sometimes with the interpretation of looks, and Safi sang to him the divine airs of her native country. The Turk allowed this intimacy to take place and encouraged the hopes of the youthful lovers, while in his heart he had formed far other plans. He loathed the idea that his daughter should be united to a Christian, but he feared the resentment of Felix if he should appear lukewarm, for he knew that he was still in the power of his deliverer if he chose to betray him to the Italian state which they inhabited. He revolved 1,000 plans by which he should be enabled to prolong the deceit until it might no longer be necessary, and secretly to take his daughter with him when he departed. His plans were facilitated by news which arrived from Paris. The government of France were greatly enraged at the escape of their victim, and spared no pains to detect and punish his deliverer. The plot of Felix was quickly discovered, and De Lacy and Agatha were thrown in prison. The news reached Felix and roused him from his dream of pleasure. His blind and aged father and gentle sister lay in a noisome dungeon, while he enjoyed the free air and the society of her whom he loved. The idea was torture to him. He quickly arranged with the Turk that if the latter should find a favorable opportunity for escape before Felix could return to Italy, Safi should remain at the border at a convent at Leghorn, and then, quitting the lovely Arabian, he hastened to Paris and delivered himself to the vengeance of the law, hoping to free De Lacy and Agatha by this proceeding. He did not succeed. They remained confined for 5 months before the trial took place, the result of which deprived them of their fortune and condemned them to a perpetual exile from their native country. They found a miserable asylum in the cottage in Germany, where I discovered them. Felix soon discovered that the treacherous Turk, for whom he and his family had endured such unheard-of oppression, on discovering that his deliverer was thus reduced to poverty and ruin, became a traitor to good feeling and honor, and had quitted Italy with his daughter, insultingly sending Felix a pittance of money to aid him, as he said, in some plan of future maintenance. Such were the events that preyed on the heart of Felix and rendered him, when I first saw him, the most miserable of his family. He could have endured poverty, and while this distress had been the meed of his virtue, he gloried in it. But the ingratitude of the Turk and the loss of his beloved Safi were misfortunes more bitter and irreparable. The arrival of the Arabian now infused new life into his soul. When the news reached Leghorn that Felix was deprived of his wealth and rank, the merchant commanded his daughter to think no more of her lover, but to return to her native country. The generous nature of Safi was outraged by this command, and she attempted to expostulate with her father, but he left her angry, repeating his tyrannical mandate. A few days after, the Turk entered his daughter's apartment and told her hastily that he had reason to believe that his residence at Leghorn had been divulged, and that he should speedily be delivered up to the French government. He had subsequently hired a vessel to convey him to Constantinople, for which city he should sail in a few hours. He intended to leave his daughter under the care of a confidential servant to follow at her leisure with the greater part of his property, which had not yet arrived at Leghorn. When alone, Safi resolved in her own mind the plan of conduct that it would become her to pursue in this emergency. A residence in Turkey was abhorrent to her. Her religion and her feelings alike were averse to it. By some papers of her father which fell into her hands, she learned of the exile of her lover, and learned the name of the spot where he then resided. She hesitated some time, but at length she formed her determination. Taking with her some jewels that belonged to her, and a sum of money, she quitted Italy with an attendant, a native of Leghorn, but who understood the common language of Turkey, and departed for Germany. She arrived in safety at a town about 20 leagues from the cottage of De Lacy, when her attendant fell dangerously ill. She nursed her with the most devoted affection, but the poor girl died, and the Arabian was left alone, unacquainted with the language of the country, and ignorant of the customs of the world. She fell, however, into good hands. The Italian had mentioned the name of the spot for which they were bound, and after her death, the woman in the house in which they lived took care that Safi should arrive safely in the cottage of her lover. And that concludes chapter 14 of Frankenstein, the modern Prometheus. Okay, yep, so it's pretty interesting to me that the monster ended up with the letters, and he's handing them off to Victor, who may now actually be handing them off to the captain, if these letters are indeed such precious proof. Once again, if I was filming this, we would see the letters at various stages of decay being passed from person to person. This whole story is a massive game of telephone. But there's a few original artifacts that just kind of manage to bleed through, like these letters, perhaps. And that's really interesting. Kai4M says, Mary had read 1001 Nights a year or so before starting to write Frankenstein. I strongly suspect that's partially responsible for the amount of narrative within a narrative here. Yeah, that tracks. That tracks, Kai4M.
Hyena Baboy says, I've been quietly listening and looked at my phone, and my dog had somehow opened the document, from the pinned link, and was reading along. Nice. He's like, wait. If that guy can learn to read, maybe I can too. I'm going to be the next Apollo the Parrot. Book. Hat. Metal. Bowl. Paper. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to dump the materials we've got back here. We got about 15 minutes left in this stream. That was the last chapter. Anybody who's watching this for the VOD or in the VOD is welcome to jump forward if you're just looking for the story. We are going to have a little conversation. Skittish Wishes says, my favorite thing about this book is that Mary started writing it as part of a dared challenge between her and some other author friends because they got bored today to see who could write the scariest ghost story. Well, Skittish Wishes wrote it as the horroriest horror, but yeah. To my knowledge, I believe it was a ghost story contest. And this story technically isn't about a ghost, per se. But they didn't have the genre of horror yet. They had the genre of ghost story. So this was ghost story adjacent. They didn't have science fiction yet, but they had ghost stories. Okay. Only at night, la-da, only at night, only at night. It's okay, she still won. Just as a reminder, we are 20 away from the next face camera expansion milestone. Tips are welcome via paypal.me/JoeHills and YouTube Super Chat. Okay. Okay, Cortex just reached out to me saying there might be a release candidate for Voxy soon, and that if some of y'all want to help test it, I can pass that on to you. I'm waiting for the exact link to send to you guys. But if y'all have been enjoying me testing Voxy, you can have a chance too. Because, yeah, so far it's been kind of a relatively closed thing, with Cortex sharing it with some of the hermits and some folks in Cortex's own Discord. Philodox says, this is amazing. I think I built this from GitHub, but my computer may be too old. That's possible, yeah. Cat Stupid says, yeah, I would love to play with Voxy. Cool. Well, let's see. Cortex sent me that message a half hour ago, and I replied just now. So, I don't know what time it is there, but Cortex might already be asleep, or I might have missed him. So that link, I might not have that for you guys today. That's just something to be aware of. Hopefully I will have that for you soon. I didn't realize when I saw the message that it had come through a half hour ago. I thought this was just now. Do you have a URL I can share in chat? Okay, cool. Yeah, Cortex primarily tests on Intel and NVIDIA systems because of lack of access to other stuff. I have suggested setting up some sort of Patreon or tip jar so that folks could possibly chip in toward buying additional test hardware, but that is currently out of scope for Voxy development. I will continue to let Cortex know that is a standing offer. Skittish Wishes says, is there going to be another book once Frankenstein is done? Do you know what book? I picked the books kind of last minute. I have a big list of books, but honestly, I don't want to commit to something at the wrong time. Depending on like what the political climate is, where my headspace is, what I'm working on in game, I want to just there's a lot of factors that go into picking the book, and a lot of them are unknowable. Like once I start the book, I'm kind of locked in for 9 to 12 months, right? So I really so that's already being locked in to something for a while. I don't want to pick another book 6 months before that, because then if I announce a book, then I'm locked in for 15 to 18 months, right? I don't want people rushing out and going to buy a book and then being like, Joe, you said this was the next book and now it's not, and I bought it and now I'm sad. Yeah, nobody wants that. Okay. Boom, 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 boom. Cat Stupid says, as potential users on Voxy on different systems, where you know what? That's a good question. Also, if you have a specific place you'd like them to direct that feedback to, I'd want to relay those instructions as well. Thanks. Great. Yeah, these are all great questions, and I am adding them to my conversation with Cortex so I can make sure you guys have what you need to be helpful testers. We want that time to be spent constructively. No problem, Cat Stupid. I have had so much fun playing with Voxy. It has brought me a lot of joy, and I'm very excited to share that joy with you. But part of that joy has also been contributing back feedback and information that is helping make this better for everybody. And I want to make sure you guys have the opportunity to do that as well. So this is not an early release. This is an early release candidate, basically. This is... okay. Okay. Cool. So I can send... Okay. Cortex is saying... Okay. So, to be clear, you'd like me to post a Discord invite link for folks who want to test? Cool. Okay. Cortex is getting back to me now, and we are sorting this out. While we do, just as a reminder, tips are welcome via paypal.me/JoeHills and YouTube Super Chat. It's whatever fits your workflow best. Bum, 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 bum. Okay. So I'm not sure. So Cortex has asked me to send an invite link. So if I hit invite people, cool. So it says I don't have the ability to send it. Okay, cool. It looks like I don't have the permissions required to generate an invite link. Oh, Cortex just posted that. Okay, great. Thanks. So we're just going to give Cortex a few minutes to send that my way. Cortex is generating the invite link now. Okay, and then we are going to grab some more logs here as we continue to chop, chop, chop. All this down, down, down. Down, down, down. Okay. Okay. So here is, okay, Cortex's Voxy Discord invite link. For anybody that's interested, I'm going to post this here as well. And then the specific channel, once you have joined the Discord, to get to the Voxy Test 3. That doesn't seem to point directly to a jar. Let me see if maybe I'm doing this wrong. Hold on. Okay, so that points to the thread in general. Maybe is the jar pinned there? Okay, the jar is pinned. Okay. And jar is pinned in this channel. So once you accepted that invite, the jar is pinned in this channel. And as new jars happen, the pinned message is updated. Yay, thank you, Cortex. So, hopefully that's helpful for anybody who has been enjoying. Can anybody confirm that that works on their end? I don't normally relay Discord invite links. I don't know that Cortex generates a ton of them either. Cat Stupid says, I'm trying now. Excellent. Yeah. Crafting Eden, I don't weigh in on directing fan projects. It's nothing about your particular choice of projects. That's just a standing policy I have. Thank you for asking, but that's not for me to say. Kyle2K says the Discord thing works. Skittish Wishes confirms it works. Excellent. Excellent. Yay. Simply Lost confirms it works. That's good news. Okay, we are getting a lot done here. Boy. Okay. Kyle says, I'm excited to try it. It looks amazing. Excellent. Whoops, we have fallen in a hole. That happens sometimes. That does happen. What can I say? We are making a lot of progress. 2 hours of digging, basically, this stream. Not bad. Cat Stupid says, thank you, Joe and Cortex. You're most welcome. And let's see. Cortex added something else here. Cortex also says thanks. And this is all appreciated. So yeah, thank y'all for chipping in your time. Ona Titan says someone should take Voxy across an old Hermitcraft map. Well, if that's the sort of thing you want to do, I'm not going to stop you. I tried it on the Season 9 map, and I got tired of flying around. I was like, I have too much work to do. Because the thing is, I couldn't figure out if there was a way for a local map file to have Voxy ingest the entire world save without flying around to cache the chunks. There probably is, I just hadn't figured it out. So I flew around a little bit so I could look back. Cortex says, yes, you can. Okay, good to know. If you want to share how that works with people, that I'm sure they would appreciate it, because that's probably a pretty common use case for this. People wanting to see worlds of SMPs. Voxy import world, Hermitcraft S9. Ah, interesting. Okay, well, now I know that would have saved me a lot of time. I probably should get better at tools. Okay. Okay. It also works for Bobby chunks. Yeah, I didn't have any. I just did a fresh install when I was testing. I wasn't using my old Bobby version from Season 9. Yeah, when I started working on a project this broad, I knew that faster computers and Bobby mod improvements would make showing off something this wide really fun and cool and interesting. But I had no idea we were going to have this great leap forward from Voxy as well. That was a very pleasant surprise. Okay, so this shovel is basically dead. Okay, we should probably go replace both of these tools, now that I'm looking at it. Dun, dun, dun. Dun, 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 dun. Okay. So, we're going to toss these in here. Boy, we are getting a lot done. And it is about time to wrap up the stream. We've been giving PayPal a chance to roll in any last-minute tips. Let's give a quick stretch. Okay. Okay. So... Okay. Looks like we are all good on everything, so we're going to go ahead and wrap up the stream here. Oh, I forgot it's Friday. We need to go ahead and wrap up. We're going to raid Mystery Science, or Mystery Pinball Theater 3000 tonight. who are watching The Ultimate Weapon 1998. I'm not sure what movie that is, but I'm sure they're going to make fun of it really well. So when you get over there, our raid message is howdy y'all, Joe Hill's raid here. Once again, keep an eye on my, what do you call it? Streams, not my stream schedule, my Blue Sky. I'm not going to be streaming on my own channel tomorrow, but I might be streaming on someone else's. And for operational security reasons, I'm not going to say more, but because this is not like an open to the fans event, but this might be interesting for some of y'all. So keep an eye out on my Blue Sky. Okay, is there anything else I need to do before we wrap up? The stream schedule is always available at joehills.net/soon. I'm not sure how much I'm going to be on camera tomorrow. If it looks like if I get there and they want me on camera a lot, then I might post this on my own stream schedule with a link to which channel it's on. But I don't know, honestly, how this is I'm kind of not out of my comfort zone, but I'm trying something different tomorrow. So yeah, we'll play it by ear. We'll play it by ear. And when I get home, I will be, yeah, when I get back on Sunday, I will definitely tell y'all what I am up to. Anyway, until next time, y'all, this is Joe Hills from Nashville, Tennessee. Keep adventuring. Stop streaming, stop in the stream. Just as soon as YouTube lets me. Oh, wait, I don't have to do